Trump signed an executive order increasing tariff on Canada from 25% to 35%.
We have made a few deals today that are excellent deals for the country. You know, we're taking in literally trillions of dollars.
This morning, the trade war is now impacting tomatoes. A new policy kicks in today, making way for a 21% price hike on tomato imports.
This isn't just about tariffs, supply chains, or political disagreements. This is about power. It's about who controls the global economy and whether America's long-standing dominance is beginning to crack. Canada's sudden declaration is being hailed as a masterstroke of economic resistance, and it's sending shockwaves through markets, corporations, and governments worldwide. For decades, the relationship between the United States and Canada has been seen as one of the strongest alliances in the world. The two nations share the world's longest undefended border, billions of dollars in trade, and a deep cultural connection. Canada has long been America's largest trading partner, supplying critical resources like oil, timber, steel, and agricultural products. But this blackout is proof that even the strongest relationships can fracture under pressure. Welcome to Traveling Vibes. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe to Traveling Vibes, because today's story is one you won't want to miss. What we're witnessing right now is nothing short of historic. Canada has declared a nationwide blackout. Not a blackout of power grids or energy, but an economic and trade blackout aimed directly at the United States. And this bold move has left Donald Trump's trade war strategy in pieces. Years of political tension, economic rivalry, and aggressive tariff battles have come to a boiling point, and now one of America's closest allies has just sent a message that Washington cannot ignore. To understand how we got here, we need to rewind the clock. When Donald Trump took office, he promised to put America first by rewriting trade agreements, imposing tariffs, and reshaping the global economic order. One of his earliest targets was Canada, a country he accused of taking advantage of American farmers and manufacturers. The renegotiation of NAFTA into the USMCA was a clear sign of Trump's aggressive approach to trade, but it was only the beginning. Trump went on to impose tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum, sparking outrage in Ottawa. Canada responded with its own retaliatory tariffs, and a trade war between two allies was born. At the time, many analysts believed that Canada would back down. After all, America is the larger economy, with far more leverage. But that assumption underestimated Canada's ability to play the long game. Ottawa quietly diversified its trade relationships, strengthening ties with Europe, Asia, and Latin America. It invested heavily in domestic industries to reduce reliance on American imports. And, as tensions escalated, Canada's leaders prepared for the day when they would push back harder than ever. That day has arrived. The blackout Canada has declared is not a literal blackout of energy, but rather a sweeping halt on exports of critical goods and resources to the United States. From lumber to natural gas, from minerals to agricultural products, Canada has essentially shut the faucet off. Overnight, supply chains across America have been thrown into chaos. Construction companies are scrambling for materials. Energy prices are spiking. Manufacturing plants are slowing production. What Canada has done is weaponize its economic power, and the results are devastating for the U.S. economy. This move has left Trump's trade war strategy in tatters. For years, Trump positioned himself as a master negotiator who could bend America's allies and adversaries to his will. He used tariffs as leverage, believing that other nations needed the U.S. market too much to fight back. But Canada's blackout proves that even America's closest partners have limits, and they are willing to stand up when pushed too far. The blackout is a statement. Canada will not be bullied, and it has the tools to inflict real pain on the United States. The economic fallout has been immediate. Wall Street is rattled. American corporations that rely on Canadian imports are reporting massive losses. The housing market is bracing for a crisis as lumber prices soar. Energy companies are warning of shortages and skyrocketing costs. American consumers are starting to feel the pinch as prices rise at the grocery store, at the gas pump, and in everyday goods. This is not a distant geopolitical dispute. This is a crisis hitting Americans where it hurts most, their wallets. And let's be clear, Canada is not acting alone. This blackout is part of a larger shift in the global balance of power. As America has pursued aggressive trade policies under Trump, many nations have sought ways to reduce their dependence on U.S. markets. China has built alternative trade networks across Asia and Africa. The European Union has strengthened its own economic alliances, and Canada has quietly joined this movement, signing trade agreements with partners like Japan, Australia, and the EU. The message is clear. The world no longer sees the United States as the sole leader of the global economy. Trump's reaction to this crisis has been explosive. Sources close to the administration report that the president is furious, calling Canada's blackout a betrayal and threatening severe retaliation. But what options does Washington really have? Sanctions could escalate tensions further, hurting American businesses even more. Military action is unthinkable against a close ally. And negotiating from a position of weakness is not Trump's style. For perhaps the first time in his presidency, Trump is facing an economic opponent that he cannot intimidate. This moment marks a turning point in U.S.-Canada relations. For over a century, these two nations have stood shoulder to shoulder through wars, economic crises, and political upheavals. But Trump's trade war has eroded that trust. Canada's decision to declare this blackout is not just a response to tariffs. It's a rejection of Trump's entire strategy. Ottawa is sending a message not just to Washington but to the world. America's bullying tactics will not be tolerated, even by its closest friends. Now, let's talk about what this means for the average American. In the short term, consumers will feel the pain. Prices on essential goods are already climbing. Grocery stores are reporting shortages of certain foods that rely on Canadian imports. Home builders are halting projects due to lumber shortages. Energy bills are expected to rise as natural gas supplies tighten. And this is only the beginning. Economists are warning that if the blackout continues, the US could see a recession triggered not by China, not by Europe, but by Canada. For Canada, this is a high-risk move. Cutting off trade with the United States is not without consequences. Many Canadian industries rely on US markets, and this blackout will hurt Canadian workers too. But Ottawa is betting that its diversified trade relationships and strong domestic industries will allow it to weather the storm better than Washington. And so far, that gamble appears to be paying off. What makes this story even more remarkable is how it reflects the broader transformation of global trade. For decades, the United States has used its economic power to shape the world. Trade deals, sanctions, and tariffs have been tools of American dominance. But as countries like Canada push back, it's becoming clear that the era of unquestioned U.S. economic leadership is over. Nations are willing to endure short-term pain to assert their independence. They're building alternative alliances, and they're challenging America's assumptions about global power. The political implications of this blackout are enormous. Trump has built his presidency on the promise of making America great again, often through aggressive economic policies. He told his supporters that tariffs would bring back jobs, strengthen American industries, and put the U.S. in a position of strength. But this crisis is showing the limits of that approach. Instead of making America stronger, Trump's trade war has alienated allies, disrupted supply chains, and left the U.S. vulnerable. This blackout also underscores a larger truth. Globalization is changing. In the 20th century, America was the undisputed leader of the global economy. But in the 21st century, power is shifting. Countries like China, India, and yes, even Canada, are asserting themselves in ways that would have been unthinkable a generation ago. The world is no longer centered around Washington, and Trump's trade war may have accelerated that shift. For American businesses, this is a wake-up call. Companies that once took Canada's cooperation for granted are now scrambling to adjust. Supply chains are being restructured. Investment plans are being reevaluated. And some corporations are even considering moving production out of the United States to avoid the fallout from Trump's policies. This is not just a trade dispute. It's a fundamental reshaping of the global economy. For everyday Americans, this may feel like yet another political story that doesn't affect their lives. But make no mistake, this crisis will be felt in every household. Prices are rising. Jobs are at risk. Industries that rely on Canadian imports, from energy to agriculture to manufacturing, are already facing layoffs. This is not a distant geopolitical battle. It's a fight that will hit home hard. What happens next will depend on how both nations respond. Canada has made its move, and it's a bold one. The question is whether Washington will escalate or seek compromise. Some analysts believe this blackout is a negotiating tactic, a way for Canada to force Trump to lift tariffs and return to the bargaining table. Others see it as a deeper shift, a permanent realignment in U.S.-Canada relations. Either way, the world is watching closely, because this isn't just about two nations. This is about the future of global trade and whether America can maintain its role as a superpower. As this crisis unfolds, one thing is clear: the days of assuming America's dominance are over. Canada's blackout is proof that even small nations can stand up to Washington when pushed too far. And if America can't maintain trust with its closest allies, what does that mean for its ability to lead the world? For Trump, this is a political nightmare. His supporters expected him to bring stability and prosperity through tough trade deals. Instead, they're facing rising prices, economic uncertainty, and a collapsing trade strategy. His critics are already calling this blackout proof that his approach has failed. With an election looming, this crisis could become a defining moment of his presidency. Thank you for watching Traveling Vibes. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, subscribe to Traveling Vibes for in-depth analysis, breaking political news, and stories that go beyond the surface. This blackout is just one chapter in a much larger story about the shifting balance of power in the world. Stay tuned, because the next chapter could be even more explosive.